Mount Sinai. Has anyone ever heard of Mount Sinai? Well, if you're a Christian or a Jew, you should have heard of Mount Sinai. If you read the Bible, of course you should have heard of Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is a mountain where very significant events took place. In fact, not very. The most significant events in the stories of the Old Testament took place when God himself descended on the top of Mount Sinai and gave Moses the Ten Commandments. When the Israelites rebelled against God, as Moses was on the top of Mount Sinai for 40 days with God, and the Israelites decided to worship a golden calf, and 3,000 Israelites fell by the sword that day. When God ordered Moses to strike the rock of Horeb, and gallons of water poured out for the Israelites to drink in the desert when the Israelites had no water to drink, God made a miracle. Now, we had to believe that story based on faith alone. And many people believe that the real Mount Sinai is in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, but there's no historical, biblical evidence to indicate that the Israelites were there in the first place. And as well, the Bible states 70 times that the Israelites were led out of the land of Egypt. So why would they go to a mountain in Egypt? The Bible's pretty clear on that. They were led out of Egypt. And the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt has attracted religious pilgrimages. They've built a monastery as well nearby. So people, I do believe, held to the fact that it was in Egypt. But it's not. It is in Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is a nation that is synonymous with Islamic State. It is a nation enriched in oil resources. And in northwest Saudi Arabia lies some of the greatest biblical discoveries that was ever made. And the evidence has been suppressed for a very long time. But in recent years, the evidence has been revealed to the world. But many of the world don't still know about it. So I'm delighted that I can have a platform to share the truth of the Exodus story, and hopefully will reach those who do not believe, because it's absolutely mind-blowing the evidence that has been recovered in the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia that brings the Exodus story to life, that would make a Bible scholar's mouth water and an atheist scholar eat their words. Because why? The Bible is the infallible word of God, and you see stories like this coming to life and still the evidence is there right in front of you. Really goes to show that the God we worship is true. The Christian God, the God Yahweh, Jesus Christ, the Bible is true. You know, especially it's great for your faith. Come on, the Bible is true. So anyway, I'm going to talk about the Exodus story now. The Israelites were in the land of Egypt for 400 years, and during that 400-year period they became enslaved in the land of Egypt. As the population of the Israelites grew in the land of Egypt, the Pharaoh must have thought they were a threat to his political power and a threat to their culture. So the Israelites became enslaved, and a brutal Pharaoh wanted to murder the firstborn of every male child. So he ordered every male child to be thrown in the River Nile. Now, Moses' mother, of course, got wind of that, and she put Moses in a basket and let him flow down the River Nile. But Moses ended up into the hands of the person who was trying to kill him, the Pharaoh. As Pharaoh's daughter found Moses down the River Nile and took him in to the kingdom of Egypt, and Moses was reared in royalty. One day Moses seen an Egyptian beating an Israelite, and Moses killed the Egyptian. After he killed the Egyptian, he fled from Egypt and went to Midian and married Jethro's daughters. Now, Midian is in modern day Saudi Arabia. Now, one day, as Moses was tending to Jethro's flock, God appeared to Moses in a burning bush. Obviously startled Moses, but told Moses to go back to Egypt. He could hear the cries of his people. Now, Moses asked God, where's he going to bring him? God says, you will worship me on that mountain, the mountain of God. So Moses went back to Egypt, to confront the Pharaoh about letting the Israelites go. But the Pharaoh didn't know who the Hebrew God was. So, of course, he was not going to let the Israelites go without a fight. Anyway, definitely not. And he didn't know who the Hebrew God was. But he was going to find out as God sent plague after plague after plague. 10 plagues. Pharaoh had enough and let the Israelites go. So the Israelites were free. They were walking out of the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh had a change of heart. In fact, God changed his heart and decided to pursue the Israelites. Now the Israelites ended up on a beach. Now where is that beach? Well, I'll say in a minute. So as Pharaoh and his army were pursuing the Israelites, they were scared. They thought Moses had just brought them out there to get them killed. But of course Moses trusted in God, and God told Moses to take out his staff, and God split the Red Sea. And Moses said, the Egyptians you see here today, you will see no more. As the Egyptian army was destroyed, God made a clear way for the Israelites to leave Egypt through the Red Sea. When God made the miracle at the Red Sea crossing, and the Egyptian army was destroyed. Now where was that beach that miracle at the Red Sea happened? Well, the location seemingly has been discovered, and is believed to be a beach called Nuweiba Beach, which seemingly measures over 10 miles, making that beach the perfect fit to hold the Israelites, as seemingly 1 to 3 million Israelites were led out of the land of Egypt, and that was the perfect beach. There has been recoveries of chariot wheels and Egyptian chariots in the Red Sea by deep sea scuba divers and drones. So could that be the Egyptian army? Very well could be. Now, as the Israelites were led out of the land of Egypt, as they embarked on an adventure, they dwelt at a place called Elim, which had 12 wells and 70 palm trees, where the Israelites dwelt. You could still see the 12 wells, and you can see the palm trees, a lot more palm trees now than 70, but you can still see the 12 wells to this day where the Israelites would have dwelt and rested after they were freed from the land of Egypt. Still to this day. You look, it's a beautiful sight, isn't it? This is where I believe the Israelites dwelt, at those wells. Breathtaking. So, as their journey continued, they got thirsty, and they said it to Moses, you brought us out of the land of Egypt to die in the wilderness of thirst. So God told Moses to stand at the rock of Horeb and strike the rock, and water will come forth. So Moses done as God said. He stood at the rock of Horeb and struck the rock, and water, gallons of water poured, and you can still see the split rock to this day. Now if you look at that rock, it paints a vivid picture that in fact a miracle flowed out of that rock. That rock itself is a testimony, I believe, to the miraculous power of God, that you know by just looking at that rock that is in fact where Moses struck the rock and God made water flow in the wilderness for the Israelites to drink. Absolutely awesome. God is an awesome God, and you can just imagine the Israelites drinking the water. It is absolutely breathtaking, that picture there is. And people as well, explorers and researchers alike, have went into the middle of the split rock and have testified that is water erosion in the split rock. Listen, a miracle happened. It is so cool. Anyway, we go on. Now, God ordered Moses to build an altar of uncut stone at the base of Mount Sinai. Moses did. He built an altar of uncut stone and set up the 12 pillars to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, you can still see the altar of uncut stone, and you can still see the 12 pillars, which represents the 12 tribes of Israel 3,000 years later. That in fact matches the Exodus story. Absolutely mind-blowing. Now, as Moses went up to the top of Mount Sinai to meet God, as God descended from heaven, and God's holy, awesome presence came down from heaven and descended on the top of Mount Sinai, which frightened the Israelites with God's presence. Moses went up to meet God as God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. as God descended on the top of Mount Sinai like a consuming fire, you can still see the unique colour of black, where I do believe that is exactly where God descended in comparison to the rest of Mount Sinai. It really does stand out, and it looks like the exact spot where the Exodus story of God himself descended on the top of Mount Sinai. It is absolutely awesome. As Moses spent 40 days and 40 nights at the top of Mount Sinai, the Israelites grew impatient and was wondering where Moses was gone. So they decided to worship a false god, to set up an altar and worship golden calf, and exalted the golden calf. Now this golden calf was called Hathor. It was an Egyptian false god, the god of prosperity. And the altar, you can still see the altar to this day where the Israelites set up to exalt this golden calf, and you could see the hieroglyphics of the golden calf on the boulders on the altar still to this day. Look, there is the evidence there. This took place. This happened. It is fenced off by the Saudi authorities as an archaeological site still to this day. Now when Moses came back down from God's presence, as God seen that the Israelites were worshipping a golden calf, it infuriated God, because God led the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, from in slavery, from being mistreated, and God done great miraculous signs and wonders. But the Israelites turned their back on God and worshipped a false god that is widely worshipped in a land that they were enslaved. When Moses came back down from the mountain, he broke the golden calf, and 3,000 people fell by the sword that day for their idolatry. Now as well at this mountain, I mean this Mount Sinai is absolutely sacred. You could still as well see as well the cave of Elijah, where Elijah travelled for 40 days and 40 nights, and God led him to the mountain of God, and Elijah went to the cave, and you could still see the cave there to this very day. Guys, I would love to have a physical tour around that Mount Sinai. I would love to see the evidence right there in front of me physically. I would love to be there. I'd say it's awesome. I think now these days it's a lot more accessible. Saudi authorities would give you a lot more access to Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia than before, as explorers have been arrested, stuff has been confiscated. Ron White back in the 70s and 80s and his two sons were held for days, and the evidence of what the discoveries was confiscated. People have had issues before, but I think it's a lot more accessible, and so, you know, people can go and see that these biblical events happened, that the evidence is right there in front of you. The Bible is true, and it is the written word of God. Absolutely breathtaking. And I'm going to go, you know, we look at this story, we look at the events that happened as God descended and gave Moses the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments that we have broken. Every human being has broken. I've broken. Everyone, every prophet, everyone is broken. And we could not keep the law. We could not keep the commandments. None of us could. So that's why 1,000 years later, a new covenant was given. Jesus Christ came to the world. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish. That through Jesus we can be reconciled back to our Creator. Because through the law we couldn't. Through the old covenant we couldn't. So by God's grace there's a new covenant we have made, that we come to God through his Son Jesus Christ. Not through the law of Moses, but by his Son Jesus. So thank God for God. Anyway, I'm coming to the end of this video. I did hope you enjoy it, and if you did, please don't forget to hit a thumbs up. I do hope to see you soon. Till then, be blessed.